they were elected to do.
I have just a little bit of a problem with, you know, the legislators in Congress and the Senate. Sometimes they're not doing the right thing. They're you know, we've heard about all these special interests that have the influence in there. I know it's unrealistic to think that they're going to support every person in their districts, but there should be a general consensus of what is the right thing to do for the people. Remember,
That's right.
This is we the people.
Exactly.
It's no longer we the people, and you're a constitutionalist, and you know that. It is absolutely not we the people anymore. It's those people, and that's a shame. We've deteriorated to a point where we have virtually, other than the vote, no power whatsoever.
But the vote is a powerful tool, a very powerful tool, and that's one reason we are seeing a rare occurrence in Nassau County, and that is a primary. Political bosses do not want a primary. They want to control the nomination process because they know that those who control the nominations control the government, and too many people who control the government are using it for their own self-enrichment. And this is another problem we see from the local level to the national level. Special interests they're all out to get their own piece of the pie. And in too many cases, they're out there to make life as difficult as possible for elected officials. They want to say, if you don't give us what we're asking for, we are going to impose X, Y, or Z forms of pressure on you. Or we'll cut off forms of money, forms of other support. And there are too many politicians that give into this pressure, and it is the rest of us who suffer. We have government that has been, and this happens periodically, by the way, in American history. It's not a new phenomenon, but it is one that has been festering for years, and it really is time, I think, for a new generation of leadership to step up, to revisit some of those founding principles that made this country great in the first place, the type of country that drew immigrants overseas to make their home America, and to turn the page, to build us a better future.
All right.
But we're not going to have that as long as special interests and political bosses control our electoral process.
And I imagine the answer to all of that is get out and vote.
That's right.
That's very important. And I know sometimes voters are very apathetic about getting out and voting because they think, oh, I don't make a difference. I think every voter makes a difference.
That's
and you know, people, I think, what was the last election? They won by, you know, in some of these districts, 300 votes, 100 votes.
Oh, yeah.
2 votes. Okay.
But by fewer than 1 vote per election district.
Right.
And you have every election cycle almost, you will hear about an election somewhere in America where a race, it might be a local race, was literally decided by a single vote.
Right.
Never underestimate the power of the vote. And I think it is important for viewers to know, because few New Yorkers do know, that there is a congressional primary in New York on June 26th.
Okay.
It's a confusing situation because we actually have 3 primaries in New York this year. We had the presidential primary April 24th. As a result of a court ruling, we have this June 26th congressional primary, and then the state and local elections, primary elections will occur on September 11th, which has been the traditional date in New York State.
So this June election, people are not going to be aware of that, I would assume, right? That's going to be, it's something brand new. So they're not going to be used to it. Hopefully it's going to be on a Tuesday?
It will be on a Tuesday.
And are they going to announce it, or they're probably not going to make a big deal out of it, right?
Well, we have to try to make a big deal out of this. Let people know about this. Voters are going to get a small postcard-sized notice in the mail from the Board of Elections, and you know how often they just discard that with other mail that may look like junk mail. But it is very important. We have to drive the message home, because those who would like to keep control over the process and deny the people a vote will, I guarantee you, they will drive people to the polls who are out to get their own piece of the pie. Political bosses are going to move to get their people who work in jobs that they control, so that they will vote for the candidate of their choice. And unfortunately, and we've seen this repeatedly, and I hate to keep going back to Mr. Becker's voting record, but it bears too many similarities to Miss McCarthy's voting record in Washington. People need to be able to vote for someone who will represent them. They need a choice that will be better than simply picking between the lesser of two evils. And we do have a rare opportunity to make that choice. And that's what this primary is about, whether the people will reclaim their future or whether the bosses will continue to dictate who the nominees are.
Well, how are they going to know? Are they going to see your signs? Are they going to see something up that's going to tell them that you're here, you're in this neighborhood? Because, you know, people have a very short memory. They may see the show. They may think what you're saying is great, but they're going to forget about it in a week. And we got about 6 weeks left before we have this primary, correct?
Even less than that. Less than 5 weeks at this point.
Right.
We do have to put up signs, of course. We have to make phone calls, do all that good old-fashioned grassroots lobbying. And yes, that includes going door to door, going to every voter we can, having voters go to people they know, letting them know about this election that is approaching, reminding them, having them mark off on their calendar that the election is approaching. It's not just, by the way, for the congressional seat here. There's also a U.S. Senate primary for New York that's occurring on that same day.
Oh.
So we have to get the word out. We do it through every means possible, and I think it is important for those who are in the media, especially in the news media, anyone who's involved in journalism, to get the word out, because there are too many people who are regular readers of newspapers, even Newsday and some of these more local papers who, in the 2010 cycle, did not know that there was a primary from reading the news coverage. There must be more attention paid to this.
I agree. Well, let me change the subject just a little bit, but what's your philosophy on families and children's in Nassau County? What do you believe is most important to these families?
Well, families, of course, are the cornerstone of our society, and children are our future. It may sound like a cliche, but people say it so often because it is so true. And we're facing a situation now in which we have seniors who made their lives here in Nassau County. They can no longer afford to stay because they're being hit twice by the taxes and the regulatory system imposed by the federal government, but also by some of the highest taxes in the country on the local level. We have the highest property taxes here, one of the highest sales tax rates, one of the highest state income tax rates. All combined with the federal tax rates have made this a really oppressive place for a lot of people to live. So you not only have seniors who have been leaving, you have their grandchildren who are educated here, but then they leave before they even have a chance to start their careers. We have to seriously reform government, revisit those first principles of government, that first and foremost, government exists to protect our freedom, to protect our liberty. Our founding fathers developed a constitution because they believed there were certain innate rights that were granted by our Creator, if you go back to the Declaration of Independence, that the government is supposed to protect. And of course, beyond that, you need government to protect the security of our families and our children. That occurs both domestically and internationally. We must always be vigilant. We must be eternally vigilant about the threat of international terrorism and all other threats that could jeopardize our lives and our safety. And of course, government has a role to play when you're talking about people who cannot take care of themselves. Government does have a role to help those who cannot help themselves, but unfortunately what government has been doing, nationally as well as locally, is using its power, using your taxpayer dollars to barter, to jockey for partisan advantage so that incumbent elected officials can win their next re-election. And whether it's Carolyn McCarthy being a rubber stamp for special interests in Washington, or Fran Becker being a rubber stamp for special interests locally, that amounts to a system in which you have a small class of people who are enriching themselves on top, and it's the taxpayers, it is the families who are not part of that small privileged class who are hurt. Those are the people that we have to save.
So then you're not going to be a rubber stamp politician.
I certainly won't. And I've been among those politicians who, and I admit, I am one of those who are seeking public office, but I'm among those who has been just as willing to point out mistakes that have been made by people in my own party as by the other party. And I think we have elected officials, people like Paul Ryan in Congress, people like Tom Coburn in the U.S. Senate, who have shown themselves to be models of conscience, people who have been willing to speak out and tell it like it is, even if there are some people, even on their side of the aisle, who don't want to hear it.
So some of your constituents or potential constituents can call you and ask you a question as to what you believe.
Absolutely.
How would someone get in touch with you if they live in your potential district that you're running this primary in? How would they get in touch with you?
Well, I'll give you our phone number for our campaign headquarters.
Look right out there in the camera and tell them.
Absolutely. I'll give you our phone number for our campaign headquarters. It is 516-881-7377. Please call. Please call if you can volunteer for our campaign. We need all the help that we can get over the next 5 weeks. But call also if you have concerns. If you want someone who will be responsive to you, which certainly our current Congresswoman is not. Our website is frankscaturro.com. My last name is spelled S-C-A-T-U-R-R-O.
It's on the screen.
There you go. Go to our website and you can find out more ways to volunteer for our campaign. You can find out more of what our campaign is about. Please come out. This is your country, and we need your support on Election Day.
Well, that's very interesting. So let's have that number again.
It's 516-881-7377.
Good. Let's talk a little bit about the tax code. All right. I'm a firm believer that there should be a simpler, flatter tax for everybody. You know, I hear a lot of it on the street when we go out and talk to people. They say, well, you know, Warren Buffett pays less tax than his secretary, which is absurd, okay, and percentages. So what would a flat tax do for our country? What would it equal, will it balance out the inequities in the system?
I think a flatter and simpler tax code certainly would give us a more equitable system. And keep in mind, by the way, a lot of the loopholes that currently exist are exploited by those who are of greater means, by people who are wealthier. We have a tax code that is a testament to the influence of special interests. It is over 3 million words long. It's longer than the complete works of William Shakespeare by a long shot. We need to simplify, I think, scrap the tax code that we have and really replace it with something that is much simpler and much flatter than what we now have. There is a problem when you have a system in which nearly 50% of our taxpayers are paying no taxes at all, and you have more and more people in government who are pushing an agenda of dependency where they start to use their power to control people, to control voters, and to dispense taxpayer dollars in a way that doesn't really benefit the whole. There are a lot of budget gimmicks and a lot of games that politicians are able to play when you don't have a broader span of the population who are a part of that tax base. And by the way, I will say that under a lower tax code that we had under President Bush, which is often derided, for all of the flaws that were in that tax code, the top 1% were actually paying more money than they were under the more convoluted and higher tax rates that applied during the 1990s under Bill Clinton.